This is BBC News from BBC World. I'm Nick Gowing.
And I'm Darshini David.
The headlines. US Secretary of State Colin Powell has announced his resignation. The UN says no evidence that Iran has yet made nuclear weapons, but suspicions remain. US forces launch fresh attacks in Fallujah as fighting spreads to other Iraqi cities.
And in business, the dollar slides against the euro and the yen on concerns over the US trade and budget deficits. The US State Department has confirmed the Secretary of State Colin Powell plans to resign. He's the latest high-level member of President Bush's cabinet to announce plans to leave. Now, let's move on with the international business. Darshini David has joined me. Darshini. Thanks, Nick. And we're going to have a look at the dollar and the euro and the yen, because guess what? The dollar's looking weaker yet again. Still not very great damage by any means. The oil price also down, so limiting the damage there.
As French troops continue to patrol troubled regions of Ivory Coast, West African leaders have called for a vote for an arms embargo at the UN Security Council later this week. You're watching BBC World. I'm Nick Gowing. Our main headlines. The US Secretary of State Colin Powell announces he will resign. And Iran promises to stop enriching uranium temporarily from next week. But the UN still confirms suspicions. So why has Colin Powell decided to resign? I'm joined by the BBC's former State Department correspondent, John Lyne. John Lyne, our former State Department correspondent, thanks for joining us here in the studio in London. Still to come, we have all the sports news with Rob Bonnet, including news from Houston, where the world's top 8 tennis players are gathered for the Masters Cup. The death toll in the earthquake which rocked the Indonesian island of Alor on Friday has risen to 23. Now the sport of today. And Rob Bonnet. Rob.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, England's cricketers have departed for Namibia. Well, they'll play 2 one-day internationals ahead of their controversial 5-match tour of Zimbabwe. Captain Michael Vaughan had already expressed his indifference to the Zimbabwe leg of the trip and repeated it today, saying he was simply not looking forward to it.
Our main news at this hour, the US State Department has confirmed the Secretary of State Colin Powell will resign. He's one of 4 senior members of the Bush administration to confirm he is leaving. And the UN says there's no evidence that Iran has yet made nuclear weapons, but says suspicions do remain. I'll be back after the weather with the world news headlines. That'll be followed by Click Online here on BBC World. Stay with us. Headlines on BBC World. The American Secretary of State Colin Powell has announced he's to resign. The US State Department said he'd stay on until a replacement is confirmed. The UN says there's no evidence that Iran has yet made nuclear weapons, but suspicions do remain. And US forces have launched fresh attacks in Fallujah as fighting spreads to other Iraqi cities. You're watching BBC World. Now it's Click Online.